This lesson today that I'm going to be giving you today is from the book of John. Now, I've used one of these books from Regular Baptist Press. It's really a Sunday school book, but it's called Reasons to Believe. And this is the case for Christ. This is lesson number 1. I want to talk first about doctrine in Jesus' life. This lesson is not just someone telling about Jesus' life again. A lot of colleges today have a series of lessons on the life of Christ, but this is more than that. This is about doctrine also. Doctrine is a big part of the book of John. And this doctrine is also called theology. Theology and doctrine are about the same thing. And this lesson has to do with doctrine, but we're going to talk mainly about sort of an introductory lesson today on the book of John. The book of John has a lot of narrative in it. Well, what is narrative? Narrative is a true story. It's not just a story. It's a true story. And I believe that the Bible is true. We have, for instance, in the book of John, the story of John the Baptist. Again, a true story. And these stories, maybe you have heard these things in some sort of a class in your church when you were young. And they used maybe flannel graph in my day. Well, there's also the story of the woman at the well in the book of John. And then Nicodemus came to Jesus by night, and Jesus told him, "You must be born again." He didn't understand this, and Jesus explained that. Well, then there was the healing of the man at Bethesda, a miracle that Jesus performed. And he does speak in John about various miracles. Jesus said to the man at Bethesda, "Take up your bed and walk." Jesus also fed the 5,000 in the book of John. These are all narratives, true stories. And John saw these things face to face. These show us the truth about Jesus. Well, let's talk about the author of the book of John. John wrote this book. There's a book called Evidence That Demands a Verdict by Josh McDowell. And he talks in there about evidence that Jesus really did exist, that the miracles really did take place. And John also is going to show us the truth and evidence that Jesus existed, that Jesus was the Son of God. The writer of this book knew a lot about Jewish customs, for instance. He explains the sacrifices, he explains the Jewish attitude of this day. The writer of John knew an awful lot about the apostles also, and Jesus Christ himself. This author was close to Christ. The three closest disciples to Jesus were John, James, and Peter. Peter is named in this book, therefore I don't believe it's him, because the author does not like to point out himself. He does not want the attention on himself. He's trying to more or less give the life of Christ and not put the emphasis on himself, because Christ is the one who died for our sins according to the Scriptures, and that he was buried and he rose again the third day according to the Scriptures. And if he did all that for us, then we should accept him and believe in him. Well, John saw the big picture of Christ. He was not concerned about details and things like that. He also shows the miracles of Christ, that this proved that he was the Son of God and that he was a real person. In John's day, one of the problems that there was the Gnostics, and the Gnostics were unbelievers. They believed mainly that Jesus was not a real body, that he really did not exist, because they believed that sinful flesh could not be co-joined with God. And they didn't see how Jesus could be both 100% man and 100% God. But see, John, he explains this, that Jesus was 100% God and at the same time 100% man. This author was close to Christ. Well, there are miracles about that Jesus did. One of them was Jairus' daughter. She came back to life. Jesus brought her back to life after she had died. There was the transfiguration, where Jesus' body was turned into his glorious body. And Peter, James, and John, as I said, they were the ones who were present there at the transfiguration. There was Jesus' prayer in Gethsemane. I saw the Garden of Gethsemane on TV, on a TV program, and it's still there. Also, John was the one that ran to the tomb when Jesus had arisen. And he even raced Peter, who was probably older, and John got there first. He was so excited that Jesus had risen. This lesson book was written by, that I'm using, was written by Alex Bauman. And as I said before, it comes from Regular Baptist Press. And he said that John was with Jesus more than any other disciple. And we'll look at this, that John was the disciple whom Jesus loved in John chapter 20 and 21.